What's up, Christ Center Mental Health Community? This is me, David Lee Chu Sarche. I represent Christ Center Mental Health, the ministry where I talk about mental health awareness from a Christian perspective in order to give you real hope in Jesus' name to the glory of God the Father by the power of the Holy Spirit. All right, before I get started on this live stream, I just have a couple quick announcements. The first one is I was originally going to do an interview today with our Christian counselor, Rosalind Morgan, but um, she couldn't make it. I think she's having some health issues, so please keep her in prayer. So I decided to do my second stream that I had scheduled for today at 4. I decided to do that now instead. Um, where I'm going to be responding to therapist Mickey Atkins. She It's going to be about Nouthetic counseling, and as you know, I have a lot of opinions about Nouthetic counseling, and I just like as someone who struggles with schizoaffective disorder and who supports psychiatry and psychology, I I do not like Nouthetic counseling, and I actually agree with what Mickey Atkins says in this video, and I'm gonna share the video here in a second. But first, I want to uh give you guys a brief idea what Nouthetic counseling is about. This is from gotquestions.org. They give a pretty good explanation about what Nouthetic counseling is. They say Nouthetic counseling, more often called biblical counseling, gets its name from the Greek word noutheo, translated admonish. To admonish is to confront as a friend and was the normal method of counseling before the advent of secular psychology. Like Nouthetic counseling is very much opposed to secular psychology and psychiatry. And as a Christian integrationist, I see no problem with integrating psychology and psychiatry with the Christian faith. Like I think that you need to use discernment when it comes to um, when it comes to psychology, because not everything in psychology is biblical. But I think that psychology and psychiatry, God uses psychology and psychology as good gifts for the benefit of His believers. And just like you could take, just like you go see a dentist. It doesn't matter if the dentist is a Christian or not. As long as the dentist does a good job on your teeth, that's all that matters. As long as they know what they're doing. Same thing with a psychologist or psychiatrist. But an aesthetic counselor would disagree. And as a Christian integrationist, I believe that all truth is God's truth. So, like, even if the truth that's being told is from a devout pagan, if it's still true, that means it's from God. Um, like, but Nouthetic counselors would disagree with that, and a lot of Nouthetic counselors, they call themselves counselors, but they don't have any kind of formal training in as in counseling. They just have their indoctrination from their Nouthetic counseling organization, but they don't have any kind of training in in psychology or psychiatry. They don't have any therapeutic training. But and that's a huge problem, because when you're dealing with the mentally ill or the emotionally vulnerable, if you don't have any kind of um, psychological training, you can end up causing a lot of damage, so a lot of permanent damage. So that's my biggest problem with Nouthetic counseling. But yeah, it goes on. This article goes on. It says Nouthetic counseling takes the view that the Bible is sufficient to counsel, correct, and admonish individuals. Like, they say they believe the Bible is sufficient to counsel, but they don't like the thing is the Bible is sufficient in all things concerning faith and godliness, but when it comes to like you the Bible that just when we say the Bible is sufficient in all things concerning faith and godliness, that does not mean the Bible is sufficient in all things. Like we wouldn't say the Bible is sufficient to tell us about neuroscience or chemistry. So the Bible is sufficient in all things concerning faith and godliness. Like so we need to keep that in mind. Like when it comes to counseling someone with mental illness, you you need a licensed clinical psychologist who's trained in to train he's trained who's trained to deal with the human mind or mental illness. Um yeah, and it goes on. Like it gives a little history. It says spearheading the Nouthetic movement was Jay Adams, a Presbyterian pastor and teacher at Westminster Theological Seminary. Adams published his book Competent to Counsel in 1970. In it, he explained, and I actually did a video series where I reviewed Jay Adams' book Competent to Counsel. Maybe I'll post a link to that playlist in the description box below. But I'm actually thinking about redoing that series. So I actually might hold off on posting the playlist in the description box. So I'm thinking about redoing that series and making it better. I don't know. I'm thinking about it, but in it he explained his term nouthetic and made a case for how secular psychological systems are opposed to scripture. And again, like even if first off, I reject the notion that all secular psychology is opposed to scripture. I reject that notion. But even if all of secular psychology was opposed to scripture, so what? Like, is God not powerful enough to use his opposition for the good of his people? Like, I believe God is sovereign enough to use even those that oppose him for the benefit of his believers. I mean, that's what Romans 8:28 tells us. Um, uh, and the three basic ideas of nouthetic or biblical counseling are confrontation, concern, and change. And it goes on to define that confrontation. The nouthetic approach to counseling uses the Bible, not human ideas, to speak to people about their problems. The counselor holds up the Bible as a mirror to show the counselee sin issues he or she may not even be aware of. Like, and that's one of the biggest things about nouthetic counseling. They nouthetic counselors blame all things on individual sin. So anytime somebody struggles with a mental illness, it's not a chemical imbalance in the brain. It's just that person's individual sin. And that's highly dangerous. They're essentially blaming people like me for our mental illnesses. They're saying it's our fault why we're mentally ill. And that's just wrong. That's the mistake that Job's friends made and that Jesus' disciples made in chapter John chapter 9, and they were both rebuked for that. Um Yeah, but yeah, you guys. I think you guys get a picture. I'll post this link in the description box below, so you guys could read this for yourself if you want to. But yeah. So like I said, I'm gonna review this video by Mickey Atkins. For those of you that aren't aware of who she is, she's a therapist slash social worker. She she did this video responding talk about the YouTuber's goal defined about therapy. Like, I will forewarn you, she does use some profanity in this video, so I hope that doesn't offend your sensibilities because I can't bleep out the profanity. But she, she does a lot of she does a lot of work responding to like fundamentalists and stuff, and most of the time I don't agree with her on stuff, but in this video I actually agreed with her. Like she was actually right about this. But yeah, let me go ahead and play this.
From a licensed accredited university, like one of the like standard public universities, run. Okay, hi everybody. Thanks for coming back if you've been here before, or hi, welcome if you're new. My name is Mickey. I'm a therapist, and we talk about therapy things on this channel. Today, we are talking about Girl Defined, specifically Bethy from Girl Defined, because they posted something on there, or she posted something on her Instagram that caught my attention. And so I did some digging, and it's kind of fucked up. So we're going to talk about it. We're going to unpack some shit. I have strong thoughts and feelings, so let's just get into it. First and foremost, I want to be super clear. I know that Bethany has talked about how she is in the middle of walking through some really traumatic shit right now in regards to trying to get pregnant and infertility and those types of things. And so I do want to be sensitive to like labeling anyone's personhood here. Generally, we try to be sensitive to not labeling anyone as a person in a particular way, but I do feel
Uh,
compelled to call out this behavior because this is like just super fucking concerning and something that needs to be talked about, in my opinion. For those of you who don't know, Girl Defined is made up of Bethy and Kristen. They each have their own respective Instagram. Kristen is not really on hers, but Bethy is really doing the most on her own personal, like private, not private, but like personal Instagram, posting reels and just like whatever. It's just like general fuckery. But this caught my attention because she posted a reel talking about how she has started
by the way,
attending
Nouthetic
biblical.
counseling, like there's two different organizations for Nouthetic counseling. There's the ACBC, which stands for the Association, um, something association something of biblical counselors, Association of Certified Biblical Counselors. That's what it stands for, ACBC. And then there's the CCEF, which stands for Christian Counseling something Foundation, or Evangelical Foundation, or something like that. There's two different branches of Nouthetic counseling, and Nouthetic counseling, there's a wide range of people who fall under the Nouthetic counseling umbrella. Like, not all Nouthetic counselors are that bad. Like Paul David Tripp um and David Pallison, I would say, are on the spectrum of not that bad. But then someone like John MacArthur or Todd Friel would be on the other end of the spectrum of the worst Nouthetic counselors. Like, so there's a wide range. Then there's people like Heath Lambert, who I would say is probably in the middle of both. He's in the middle of, he's like in between David Pallison and he's like, if David Pallison and Paul David Tripp are here, and John MacArthur and Todd Phil are here, Heath Lambert will probably be right here in the middle. So
Counseling. So yeah, that got an eyebrow raise from me because I was curious if she was going to actual counseling or if she was doing what it turns out that she's doing, which is not real counseling. She promoted a service specifically. She's promoting a service called the Association of Certified Biblical Counselors. And so when you look at their Instagram page, it looks, like a fish. They have a little logo, it's got a little tree, looks like whatever, the shit that other therapists post on Instagram, right? Seems pretty above board as far as therapy Instagrams are concerned. But I looked at their website, I did some more digging, and as it turns out, this institution is just built on a fucking pile of lies. None of the fucking people who work for this institution are educated in psychotherapy or like licensed professional counseling in any capacity. We are going
yeah,
to talk
they
about why.
actually, Nouthetic counselors, number one, Nouthetic counselors are not licensed by the states. They don't have any education in psychology. That is true. And like I said, that is a huge problem. They actually, Nouthetic counselors actually see it as a bragging point that they're not licensed by the states. They like I've actually seen certain Nouthetic counselors literally bragging about it that they're not licensed by the state, and that's a huge problem. Like if you're not licensed by the states, then you have then you're essentially going rogue and you don't have any accountability and there's no way to like make sure that you're holding to a code of ethics. Like that's a huge issue.
This is problematic, but I there's like some stuff for us to talk about first. First and foremost, I can fucking hear it now. I know that there are for sure going to be people in the comments saying like, "Well, at least she's finally going to counseling. Like you're being mean." No. Listen, no. I understand, and I thought the same thing initially. I was like, "Wow, good for her! That's really nice." She actually says some very kind things in the caption about how going to counseling is not a weakness and it's not something to be embarrassed of, and like this is good and blah blah blah, whatever. Like, great. I'm happy that she said that. However, I'm super fucking disappointed that the service she chose to promote is something like this because not all counseling is created equal and or like therapy is created equal, and it's honestly I think more harmful for people especially for their first interaction with mental health services or counseling to be traumatizing or particularly negative than it is for someone to not go at all, and this is very much that. The service that she's promoting very much has the capacity to cause people real harm and long lasting harm, and to potentially be like the deciding factor for whether
And I have spoke. What she's saying is not inaccurate. I have personally spoken to many people who struggle with mental illness, who have told me who have told me stories of their experiences with Nouthetic counselors, and their experiences are never good. Like the Nouthetic counselors, because they're not trained to know how to properly treat mental illness, they did end up causing more harm. And these people that I've spoken to, like they ended up worse after seeing a Nouthetic counselor than they were before they went to see the Nouthetic counselor. So if it's true what Jesus said about you can tell you can know them by their fruit, well the fruit of Nouthetic counseling is not is not good. Like it's actually very bad.
people write off mental health care altogether. And from what I have uncovered and like is just like freely available, by the way, this isn't like fucking investigative work. Like I'm not up my own ass thinking I'm an investigative journalist. Like this is just the shit that's on their fucking website. The practices that they use are so far removed from what is considered industry standard for typical psychotherapy that like the potential for harm here is fucking off the charts. I want to be clear, we're going to talk about this later, but it is entirely possible for someone to be a real therapist or a real counselor and to also be religious and to provide services that are geared towards religious people and to incorporate the use of the Bible or Christianity or whatever religion of choice, suits the client. This
I
is
like that she said that because it is true. It is possible to be a Christian and to be a therapist. Like Dr. Mark McMinn. He's a prime example of that. Dr. Mark McMinn is a Christian. He's a clinical psychologist. I think he's on board with the APA. Also, Dr. Matthew Stanford. He's a clinical psychologist. He's also a neuroscientist, and he is the founder of the Hope and Healing Clinic that works with mentally ill people. And he's a Christian, so it is entirely possible to be a Christian and be a therapist, clinical psychologist. Like you can but biblical or nouthetic counselors, I refuse to call them biblical counselors because they're not biblical. Like they're nouthetic counselors. Nouthetic counselors are not the way to go.
is very much a thing. This is very much possible. It's entirely possible for therapists who are licensed, credentialed, educated to be doing this ethically, appropriately, with all of their due diligence and mindfulness for the appropriate ethics and blah, 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 what the fuck ever. This, however, is not fucking that. On their website, it's very prominently advertised that you can become a certified biblical counselor. And here's the kicker: in order to become a certified biblical counselor for ACBC, all you have to do is sign up for an online training that is 30 hours in total. It's 15 weeks long, so that's about 2 hours a week, by the way, and it costs $100.
Now that is ridiculous. Like they, in order to be a certified biblical counselor through the ACBC, that's all it takes. That means anybody, if you have $150 and you have the time to spend, just like for like what was like 2 hours a week or whatever. Like if you
So
have a
dumb.
little bit of time to spend, you can become a certified biblical counselor through the ACBC. Like anybody can do that. Like just any random person on the street that decides, "Oh, I want to be a biblical counselor." Like there's no way to weed out people that are harmful. There's no way to weed out toxic people. Like there's no way to make sure that these people have the the mental capacity to handle a counseling position. Like any random Joe on the street who has the money and the time, they could be a certified biblical counselor through the ACBC. If you do not see how that's a problem, then I don't know how I can help you. Like
Don't get me wrong, okay? I don't want to be the person who
like
gatekeeps
that
my profession.
that'll be like honestly, like how would you feel if you were going to get on a plane, and if you were going to get on a plane and you found out that the pilot just took 2 hours of pilot just took 2 hours of flight simulation class, like for say 1 month. He took 2 hours of flight simulation class for a month, like every day for a month, and that's it. That was the extent of his training. That's all he did. He got and he just got a certificate at the end, and now he's calling himself a pilot. Like, would you think that pilot would be qualified to fly a plane, a commercial airline? I would hope not. I would hope that you would want him to have something more than just 2 hours being of playing on a flight simulator for a month, like for 1 month. Like I would hope that you would expect a pilot to have a little bit more training than that. Well, if you want to be a therapist or a counselor, we should expect the same kind of stuff for a counselor, especially someone who is working with people who are mentally ill. Like
Or says that like only certain people should be allowed. I certainly don't think that college education should be as expensive as it is. That's a systemic issue, and like y'all know that I don't, have a high opinion of how difficult it is to go to college and those types of things. However, the field of mental health is there's a barrier to entry there for a reason. The barrier to entry exists for the purpose of creating a sense of safety, and also for preserving the reputation of the field. And so, for people to call themselves counselors when you essentially like fucked off on your computer for 2 hours on the weekend for 4 months after paying $100 is not the fucking same. I actually did the math because I'm a petty bitch. I did the math. In order to get the 2 degrees that I have and the license that I am currently maintaining, it cost me around 85,000 fucking dollars. It took me about 5 years to get both those degrees, which actually is an accelerated timeline because for my master's master's degree, did an accelerated course where I was in school for 1 calendar year instead of the two years with semester breaks and stuff like that. And so that's faster than most people. That's about as fast as you can get that degree. And that also doesn't include the cost of maintaining my current license. That doesn't include the cost of paying for my license in the first place, of sitting for the licensure exam the first time that I took it, for the CEUs that I take, that I am responsible for taking every 2 years. The barrier to entry to becoming a licensed mental health professional is substantial. And again, I don't want to be the person who thinks or says that I think only independently wealthy people should be able to become therapists, because that's not true, and I don't believe that. However, it is very important that the field have barriers to entry and qualifications that you have to meet in order to treat other people, because we as mental health professionals are touching people's lives. We're fucking around inside of their goddamn fucking brains, and that's super fucking dangerous if you're doing it inappropriately, or you're not doing it with the appropriate care and respect for what you're actually fucking doing. You can ruin people's lives, like in an instant. You can ruin someone's fucking life, and that's a responsibility that's not lost on mental health professionals who are doing the work, who are making the conscious effort. Usually, some mental health professionals are, but usually, if things go the way that they're supposed to, based on all the barriers to entry that exist, that's not a responsibility that's lost on mental health professionals. And we're routinely reminded of how tenuous and scary and heavy the work that we're doing is. These people who are paying $100 to do some fuck all course on the internet are not doing their due diligence to make sure that they're conducting themselves with the safety and the respect that this work requires. The other thing that I wanted to talk about here is that the barriers to entry for the field don't just exist for the purpose of like fueling our own ego or making ourselves feel special. I know that there are very much therapists like that, and I do want to validate how frustrating and aggravating it is to have therapists who are like up their own butts thinking that they're like God's gift to psychotherapy. Fuck those people. But the step stools, I guess.
Yeah, I was gonna say I've definitely had. Well, I've only had one therapist who I believe like he probably shouldn't be a therapist. I think he was only a therapist to kind of stroke his own ego. But like I think that um most clinical psychologists do understand they're in a situation where they're dealing with a vulnerable population and that they need to handle their patients with the utmost care, because they like when you're a clinical psychologist and you're a therapist, you have the potential, you have the potential to cause severe harm, or you could do a much good. Like it could there's really like when you're dealing when a therapist is dealing with a patient, there's no middle ground. Like you're either going to cause really bad harm or you're going to cause much good. Like there's no middle ground. Like it's a very like I don't envy my therapist. Like I really don't. Like my therapist is in a very tough situation when she's dealing with like people like that deal with mental illness. Like therapists are in a very they have a tough job.
That you have to meet in order to become a licensed mental health professional exist for the purpose of creating a sense of safety for our clients and also for preserving the reputation of the field. When we talk about creating safety for clients, what I mean is that there are lots of different ways to become a mental health professional. You can be a licensed like social worker, so you can be an LMSW, which is what I am. It's a licensed master social worker, or you can be a licensed clinical social worker, which is the licensure that I'm like working towards right now. You can be a licensed professional counselor. You can be a licensed mental health counselor. You can be a substance abuse counselor. You can be a psychologist, you can be a psychiatrist, you can be a licensed marriage and family therapist. There's lots of different degree programs available to a person to become a professional in mental health, but the unifying factor here is that there is an agreed upon curriculum that's decided and regularly revisited and robustly tested by usually a national oversight board. So for social work, it's the counsel and social work education. In order to get a degree in social work and call yourself a fucking social worker, you have to go to a university that is accredited by the CSWE so that you can get a degree in social work and then graduate and then get a license that's been approved by sitting for an exam that's been approved by the Association of Social Work Boards. You can't just call yourself a social worker, especially a clinical social worker, just because. All of these steps and these.
See, that's the biggest difference between the so-called biblical counselors and being an actual therapist or psychologist or a social worker. Like they're like when you want to become, like, not just anybody can be a therapist or a counselor, but when you want to be when you're speaking about Nouthetic counselors, essentially anybody can do it. Like any random person on the street can do it. Like if they have enough money and if they have just a little bit of time to spare. Like that's really bad. Like that's not how, like that like I personally, I would never go to a Nouthetic counselor for one-on-one counseling because it's just like if they like if I'm going if I am going if I want treatment for for a medical condition, I'm not gonna go to my pastor for that. I want to go to my doctor. So why would I go to a Nouthetic counselor for counseling when they don't even have training to be a counselor?
Like checks and balances exist so that if you're a social worker in Kansas or you're a social worker in Arizona or you're a social worker in Alaska, there is a unified curriculum that we all have agreed is the minimum standard of care that you are required to abide by. There's also a national code of ethics. So like for psychologists, there's like the APA. For social workers, there's the social work code of ethics. We all agree that this is supposed to be guiding our practice overall. And again, it's like a unifying factor.
By the way, when I was in school, I was going to school for social work, and the social work code of ethics is very extensive. Like, there's a lot in the social work code of ethics. Like, it's very comprehensive.
The profession. It's not something that just one company who has one Instagram page can decide to fucking play willy-nilly with. They're being held accountable by the profession, by the field, by all of the people who have a stake in the reputation of this. And so this helps to hold people accountable because everybody here has skin in the game to make sure that we're all doing the right things. The reason that that reputation is important is because when someone who is a licensed
Now,
clinical
I
social.
will say this in defense of Lieutenant counselors. I remember when I did my review on Heath Lambert's book, The Gospel of Mental Illness. Um, he did say in the book that if there's any Nouthetic counselor that tells people not to see a psychiatrist, then the ACBC or the CCEF will take away that person's license from being a Nouthetic counselor. So, in some aspect, there is some kind of accountability in the Nouthetic counseling world, but it's not to the same extent as in a as there is for a licensed clinical psychologist or a social worker.
Social worker, for example, behaves in a way that's unethical or is unbecoming of the profession in the field, that social worker can be held accountable based on the nationally agreed upon standards, or based on their state licensure board also, and that social worker is then sort of like expunged from the fucking field. The profession has decided if you don't meet these qualifications, get the fuck out. You're not fucking welcome here, and so you can't call yourself one of it. Like quite literally, it's the like you can't sit with us energy, and so you again you have like a vested interest in abiding by the the rules to make sure that your practice meets the national standards. Otherwise, you can't do the job that you're doing. When people like the fucking ACBC call themselves counselors, they're banking on using the reputation of people who are licensed professional counselors, except that they're not holding themselves to the standard of actual fucking counselors who've gone to school, gotten the degrees, done the work, have a license, maintain the license, and are being held accountable nationally by like all of these accredited and licensed and credentialed institutions. And so when somebody at ACBC, who is a counselor, fucks off and does something that's super inappropriate or super harmful to someone, what are you gonna do? Oh well, there's no one to complain to. There's no like committee that can expunge this person from the profession and say like, get the fuck out of here. You can't sit with us. You can't be one of us. These people get to just kind of fuck off and do whatever they want, really, because there's no oversight committee.
Like I said, that is true. There is like I said, like I already said, there is some accountability because they will take away someone's certificate if if a nutrition counselor tells people not to see a psychiatrist. However, there is no accountability when it comes to other stuff. Like if the nutrition counselor um is is intentionally harming a mentally ill person, who's that mentally ill person going to turn to? Who's that mentally ill person going to be able to complain to? There's no one to complain to. There's no one that mentally ill person is just pretty much on their own. And like and the people I've spoken to who have been harmed by nutrition counselors, they all expressed that they had no one to turn to, like because like the lieutenant counselor was on their own, and they were just doing their own thing, and there was no one that the person can turn to when that lieutenant counselor was psychologically abusing them.
And they can also take your fucking money and then like again bank on the reputation of licensed professional counselors without having to do the work that licensed professional counselors have to do. The issue that I take with this is that obviously this is fucking harmful, this is very dangerous, this is super inappropriate and irresponsible, but also this degrades the reputation of the profession, because when somebody is on the receiving end of negligent and harmful and traumatizing care from an ACBC counselor, they might not know the difference. Somebody who, especially who is a first-time consumer of therapy, they might not understand that this is not how counseling or therapy is supposed to work. And so their experience then is that all mental health counselors or all mental health professionals are fucking bad people. Fuck that fucking profession, and I don't trust them anymore. And so it like poisons the reputation of the mental health profession that is actually very carefully and intentionally regulated with all of these checks and balances and all these rules and all these statutes and all these things, because these people are behaving in a way that's irresponsible and like they don't really give a fuck. They're like using legal loopholes to kind of get around doing the fucking due diligence that they're supposed to be doing. Basically the profession who all is made up of all these people who did do their due diligence to be responsible, to be safe, to do the right thing. They're the people who have the negative consequences and who reap the negative outcome of ACBC's fucking shitty behavior, and so do the fucking clients. These are people who like deserve and need very real help, instead of getting that from a counselor who is equipped and educated and ready to deal with those things. ACBC's like, it's fine. You could like take a course, like maybe you could take a couple if you really wanted to be like an overachiever, but generally like just keep thumping the Bible and keep feeding these people more religious rhetoric and bullshit and like hope that fixes it. And I want to be super clear, this issue with people distrusting mental health professionals is not something that the field really needs any fucking help with in the first place. Regular therapists have done a fucking bad enough job as it is of being untrustworthy and scary and unapproachable to like your average therapy consumer, and so we don't need any fucking help from bad actors like ACC poisoning the fucking well and making people perceive us in even worse of a light than we've already put ourselves in. That's the reason that I made this channel in the first place, is because it's not lost on me that people don't have positive experiences with mental health professionals and perceive the field in this way that, in my opinion, is inaccurate, especially with all of the new, like newly educated and younger people who are becoming a part of the profession all of the time. But this type of stuff only serves to make the problem worse and only serves to like further the divide between the professionals who are behaving in a way that's ethical and safe and the consumers who really do want and need the help. Like these people have an even harder time reaching each other because of people like ACBC. It sounds like I'm saying
Like
ACDC.
I will say this, like that, like Nouthetic counselors, like I think honestly, Nouthetic counselors is doing more harm in furthering, not only furthering, they're doing harm in furthering the divide between Christians and the mental health field. Like I don't see any reason why the church and the mental health field can't coincide together. Why we can't coexist? Like, like we should. Like Nouthetic counselors would have you believe that the mental health field and the church are like polar opposites, and the two should never mix. But I think that the mental health field and the church can very much mix together, can very much intertwine. Like, I don't see any issue with that.
They couldn't pick a fucking better name.
That should have been their logo.
Little lightning
A
bolt.
little lightning bolt.
And this is the other thing about their institution that really pushes my fucking buttons is that they are capitalizing on the reputation of mental health counselors and like the mental health field by calling themselves counselors. I think probably not out of ignorance. I don't know that this is like genuine misguided, like a oopsie poopsie. I think it's probably on purpose. And they're doing this for the purpose of evangelizing and proselytizing to people. Because don't misunderstand, if you're like a regular religious person who just so happened to see Bethy's Instagram post and be like, you know, I've been thinking about going to counseling, and you get on their website and you beep boop boop boop, you find a person, right? And you guys just so happen to have different religious views about like the role of a woman in the household, for example.
Now, I will say this. I think that's a bit unfair. Like, first off, as far as I understand about Nouthetic counseling, she's operating under the assumption that Nouthetic counselors are aiming to serve the general community. As far as I understand about Nouthetic counseling, they're not concerned about aiming to help out the general community. They're aiming to serve Christians. So the people who come to Nouthetic counselors are already Christians. So their purpose, the Nouthetic counselors, their purpose is not to proselytize or evangelize because their clients are most likely already Christian. So I would disagree with her there. Like they're not trying to proselytize or evangelize anyone. They're they're there to help out. Their aim is to help out other Christians.
Don't misunderstand. I'm very doubtful that that religious counselor would say, like, oh, you know, like I can just turn the other cheek. It's okay. We can agree to disagree about our religious beliefs, you know, because at the end of the day, we're both Christians. And, you know, ultimately, as long as my work is helpful to you, as long as you're getting what you came for out of these services, that's all that matters. I'm willing to suspend my personal beliefs or what I think is right about Christianity or religion or the Bible so that I can be of service to you.
Well, I don't think a counselor needs to suspend their personal beliefs. Like I think a counselor can take a stance on what the clear teaching of scripture says about certain topics, on topics that the scriptures are expressly clear about, I should say. On topics that the scriptures aren't clear about, then there needs to be a little bit of a little bit of leeway. But on topics that the scriptures are clear about, like for instance, women not being allowed to be elders, then the counselor can take a clear, defined stance on that position, and I think that's perfectly acceptable. Like I don't think a counselor needs to suspend their beliefs about like in order to help a client.
wrong, very, very doubtful that that's what's going to happen, because on their website, these people are so fucking dumb. On they have like a whole section of blog posts that are written by actual counselors who are being held up as like the gold standard for what an ACBC counselor is supposed to be. One of which is written by a person who is instructing other counselors about how to interact with counselees in terms of how to force them to police their own thoughts more effectively, and how to flee from sin in their own thoughts. Very like Bethy and Kristen, like mental compulsions kind of an energy. And the instruction given in that post is not at all centered around the idea of just creating a general improvement in mood or functionality or overall well-being, which is generally the goal in traditional like normal fucking psychotherapy. The goal is in getting the counselee to be the appropriate amount of religious, or to abide by whatever religious values this counselor has deemed the correct biblical like fundamental way that you should be. So don't misunderstand, this isn't a service that's just like a safe place for Christians, and if you guys like agree to disagree about things, no. If your counselor uncovers that you have views that are contrary to the Bible, it's entirely likely that they may very well hold you to task and like poke and prod you until you're willing to say, okay, you're right, I will change my life or my views to suit what you think is the correct way that I should be interpreting the Bible.
That is true. That is exactly what Nouthetic counselors will try and do, though, because like part of their thing, like I'll show you part of their thing. Like, hold on, real quick, I want to show you. I didn't get to that when I was showing you in this article. Like, one of the things that they're about right here, change. The goal of Nouthetic counseling is to bring change. By drawing wisdom from the Word of God, the counselor desires that the counselor experience the power and blessing of the Holy Spirit and walk in the ways of the good and keep the paths of the righteous. Now, you might ask me, well, what's wrong with that? Well, like the counselors, I've seen them say this numerous times that they will complain about if there's no change in the mentally ill person's state and they just stay mentally ill, then they'll say that the therapeutic session is not effective. Like that's an issue because someone who has mental illness, they're mentally ill for the rest of their life. Like there's no amount of counseling that's going to take away a mentally ill person's mental illness. So if your barometer for the effectiveness of your therapy is whether or not that person will have change, then you're going about your counseling all wrong. The purpose of counseling is to equip a mentally ill person to have the tools to manage their symptoms better. That's the purpose of counseling. Like, it's not supposed to be about change, it's supposed to be about symptom management. Just like medication is about symptom management, not about curing. So, yeah, so an aesthetic counselor, like their premise for wanting to counsel is wrong from the get-go.
The goal here is not to create an overall sense of well-being or like improvement in mood or functionality, as far as I can tell, based on the material that they've provided about what a good counselor is supposed to look like. It seems very much like this service is intended to evangelize new people into the religion, and also to prevent people who have doubts about the religion from leaving. It seems like it serves as a filter for anyone who has potential doubts about religion and fundamentalism, especially, so that you can catch these people and shame them and make them feel bad about that, and then like push them back down into their place and keep them in the religion. It comes off as very manipulative and very abusive, and a very inappropriate use of power, by the way, which is another thing that therapists and mental health professionals are well educated in, because we're supposed to be very aware of the power dynamic that exists in the relationship between professional and client. We're not supposed to use that to our own benefit to serve our own purposes. We're supposed to be willing to leave our own wants and needs at the door so that we don't fucking hurt people, because ultimately at the end of the day it's not about us, and it doesn't fucking matter what we want or need. It's about our client and how we can best serve them. But I don't think ACBC really cares about all of that, because they wouldn't know, because they didn't fucking get any of the fucking education about how to do that. So before we wrap up here, I want to
That's
real.
one thing I will say that like I really appreciate about my therapist is my therapist doesn't try. She kind of she leaves me in the driver's seat when it comes to our sessions. She doesn't try and like dictate to me how I should be feeling or the way that I should like she leaves room for me to um decide to like to process my symptoms and my emotions my own way. Like I can freely express myself, and like when you go to a Nouthetic counselor, it's not like that. Like the Nouthetic counselor is very much there to tell you what you should be thinking, what you should be feeling, and they don't put you in the driver's seat. Like the athletic counselors, they want to be the one to steer to make sure they're in the driver's seat, and that's not how counseling is supposed to be. Counseling is not designed to be something that the therapist dictates you to do. Like that, like I know Hollywood kind of gives the impression that the therapist dictates to the client what to do, but that's not what an actual therapy session is about. A therapy session is supposed to be guided by the client. The client dictates what they want to talk about, what they want to process, and the client guides the session, and the therapist is just there to offer to like not really guidance, but the therapist is there to offer support, so to speak. Like they're there to offer support and to every now and then to offer words of wisdom. And so but like the athletic counselors, they don't understand that. They just want the athletic counselors, it's almost like they're on a power trip. Like they want to be the ones in control of the session. Like
Really drive home the point that the reason I take issue with this is because the potential harm that this has to cause, the potential that this has to cause harm is off the fucking charts. I don't know, those words didn't want to come out of my mouth. I don't know, my brain is melting. It doesn't matter. This service generally has the potential to cause people a lot of harm, and it's frustrating to me that especially like vulnerable, very in need people might accidentally get sucked into a service like this without really understanding what it is, because they're not very upfront or forthcoming about what you're walking
yeah, I know I'm very concerned about this too, because like if there's a Christian out there who's mentally ill and they're looking for they want to find a Christian counseling service. Like first of all, I want to say I completely understand why a Christian who struggles with mental illness would want to find a Christian counseling service. I fully support that. I at one time I wanted to find a Christian counseling service until I realized that my therapist is a Christian. But like the thing is, like I fully understand why a Christian who struggles with mental illness would want to find a Christian counseling service. But what I'm afraid of is that someone who's not aware of Nouthetic counseling that comes across a Nouthetic counselor. First off, Nouthetic counselor use a deceptive title. They call themselves biblical counselors now. And so when a Christian who has mental illness that isn't aware of the background of Nouthetic counseling, they see biblical counselors, and they decide, oh, this must be a good thing. I'm going to check them out, and they go and receive services from these biblical counselors. They're going to end up walking away becoming really harmed by the experience, and then they're probably never going to want to seek treatment for their mental health struggle ever again, and they're going to spiral out of control and get even worse. That's why I'm afraid. That's why I am so adamantly opposed to Nouthetic counseling, because I see the writing on the wall. I see the potential harm that these Nouthetic counselors are going, that these, not potential, I see the harm that these Nouthetic counselors are causing on people in the mentally ill population.
Into, or like what the counseling style is going to look like from the client perspective until you're in the shit, that these people might find themselves on the receiving end of these services and be very traumatized, very hurt, very frustrated by this, and again, like potentially write off mental health services altogether, or mental health care altogether, like fucking forever. And this is not uncommon, by the way. That's another thing that I wanted to talk about. This is an objection that I hear in my clinical work, like in my own anecdotal experience, all the fucking time. All the time I hear this from people who are my own clients, or people who want like family, friends, loved ones, partners to go to therapy, but they had a bad experience. And so they say, never again. I'm never fucking going back there because that was traumatizing, or this person forced me to go and I hated it. Or, you know, I went out of good faith to like help a relationship with this person and it was a fucking disaster, and so I'm never going back. And this is very much that energy, and it's frustrating to me that this is contributing to that problem, because it's entirely possible for people to find therapy and mental health services that are like affordable, accessible, reachable, and also that like resonate with you on a personal level, regardless of whether you're religious or not, which is another thing that I wanted to address here. I don't take any fucking issue. Religiously oriented counseling, that's a valid thing that lots of people utilize. We talked about this earlier. I don't take any issue with like Bethy or Kristen or any of their fundamentalist ilk wanting to find a therapist who like rah Christianity. Like, go off. Like, they're still people who are worthy of love and belonging and deserve to feel at peace. And quite honestly, I think would probably benefit a lot from having space to unpack whatever haunted house bullshit is going on over there. And I don't want to give anyone the impression that I think that counseling coupled with religion, as long as everyone is a consenting party, is a bad thing, because it's not. It's entirely possible. It can be very useful, actually. It's something that I've fucking helped clients work through, because I have no issue with that. The issue is that the people who are providing these counseling services are not educated to do so, and the religion on top of it, I think, just adds an extra level of abuse and potential for harm here. And so if you are a person who's religious and you're like maybe, you know, nervous about seeing a secular counselor, or you just think that seeing a religious counselor would be helpful to you, there are always links in my description, and especially Psychology Today, I know in particular, has a filter that you can use to find a therapist that will use a Christian approach with you and that will incorporate the Bible in your therapy services. And these are things that you can also talk about in a free 15-minute consultation. Any therapist worth their weight in salt will have a free 15-minute conversation with you, either over the phone or over video, where you can ask and say, hey, this is very important to me. My faith is very important to me. It's really, really important that I be able to incorporate this in therapy. Is that something that you're okay with? And if they're not, fuck them. Find a different one. There are plenty of them. This is a common thing, and it's perfectly accessible. And the insinuation that ACBC is the only place that's safe for Christians to get counseling is disingenuous and also harmful. It just really fucking pushes my buttons that Bethy especially would promote something like this. Like, it's not surprising to me, but it continues to be disappointing to me, especially because like some, you know, middle-aged mom who's having a hard time, or is like in the middle of postpartum depression, or is like overwhelmed, might see this and think that this is a great idea, and then go only to be like shamed into oblivion and treated like shit, and to leave more traumatized and more in need of services than when they started. And quite honestly, I don't know that Bethy really cares. I don't know that she really cares or does the reflection that is necessary for like an influencer to be doing about the responsibility that she has in promoting something like this. I don't think that she really cares. And quite honestly, I could very much see this being the attitude of like, well, you know, if we like save a few souls, then like it's a worthwhile casualty. And that pushes my fucking buttons, because I'm not okay with people human beings in their real fucking lives and their real fucking emotions being treated in this like very lax, like blase sort of way, like a who cares if you have a bad time there. Especially as a person with a platform, it's not lost on me how much responsibility I have to be mindful about the things that I promote, and share with the audience that I've created here. And it really fucking bothers me when influencers and creators don't do their due diligence to make sure that the things that they're sharing with their own fucking audience, who they claim to fucking care about, are safe and are like an okay thing to be promoting to people. So like generally I just really want to caution people against things like this, and especially services that use like psychology-y buzzwords but don't have any like real meat and potatoes to back that up. And especially like if you find yourself with a service like this or wanting to use a service like this, please at least go and look at the like about section and look at the like our team section. If nobody on their staff has a degree in counseling or mental health or social work, or is like an LMFT or an LPC, or like has the alphabet soup at the end of their name from a licensed accredited university, like one of the like standard public universities, run. Get the fuck out of there, because this has the potential to be very, very harmful to people. And it's also very possible for you to get meaningful and useful and helpful services from somewhere else. Like I said, there's always links in my description, so I'd highly encourage you to use those. So that's that. I've like worn myself out now. My voice is all hoarse. I know that this can probably come off as kind of severe and a little bit aggressive, and I get that. I understand that this can be kind of a lot for some people, but again, I want to be super clear. I don't take issue with the fact that Kristen and Bethy and Girl Defined or like any of the fundies really are religious. It's the fact that they're leveraging this religion and this like perceived afterlife as a way to manipulate people and to coerce people into doing things that they deem are right or moral or correct, because that's an abuse of power and it's inherently manipulative and abusive. And so like especially with things like this, like you very much have the potential to be ruining people's lives. And like I don't fucking like it, pushes my fucking buttons. It's the opposite of the fucking work that I'm trying to do both here on the internet and personally, like privately in my own mental health practice. And so just like 0 out of 10, don't fucking recommend. I'm going to link a playlist up here, both with other fundamentalist.
All right, that's enough. All right. Let me see. Chuck Ward says her mouth is like an open sewer. When the so-called expert needs to use profanity to make their point, they have already lost any respect due them. Yeah, I see what you're saying with that. Like I said, like her profanity is pretty bad. But I just I feel like her overall critique of Nouthetic counseling is valid though. Like Nouthetic counseling um is a dangerous thing for people to get into, and I think that if we overlook her use of profanity and look at her overall critique of what she's saying about Nouthetic counseling, we will see that there's validity to her critique. Um, yeah, like it's definitely like the Nouthetic counseling movement is is harmful to people with mental illness, and there's absolutely like I said, like with Nouthetic counselors, they're on a spectrum. Like there's the not so bad Nouthetic counselors like Paul David Tripp and David Pallison, and then there's the worst of the worst Nouthetic counselors like John MacArthur and Todd Friel, and then there's the Nouthetic counselors that are in between like Heath Lambert, but like at Heath Lambert and Dr. Ed Welch. But so Nouthetic counselors are on a spectrum, but Nouthetic counseling as a whole, I would like to see Nouthetic counselors I would like to see Nouthetic counselors become become more like as I would like to see Nouthetic counselors progress to the point where they officially become integrationists, like in a sense. I would like to see Nouthetic counselors become integrationists. Like I think if they can become integrationists, then that'll be better. Like I think that'll be when they'll be more biblical and they'll be more helpful to mentally ill people. Anyways, so that's pretty much all I have to say about that. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section. If you watch this, I just want to thank the people who watched this live stream, and I want to thank the people who watched the playback to this live stream. Again, I apologize about the profanity if it offended your sensibilities. Um, but yeah, like I felt like this needed to be addressed because we said counseling is very popular in the Christian community, and a lot of Christians have seemed to bitten into Nouthetic counseling, lie hook, line, and sinker. And we need to talk about why Nouthetic counseling is harmful to the mentally ill community and why it needs to be rejected. All right, that's all I have to say. Let me please check out I didn't mention this in the beginning of the live stream, but if you go to www.christcenteredmentalhealth.net, you could check out the ministry website where you can see our statement of faith. You can see how to support the ministry via Patreon, Venmo, or Cash App. You can also check out how you can contact me or someone on the ministry team for 24-hour peer support. You can also check out our Christ Centered Mental Health Ministry bookstore. But which, by the way, um, oh, you can also check out our new resources page where you can see our mental health resources that we are offering you guys, or not offering, but we're letting you guys know about. Um, but if you make a pledge to the ministry Patreon account, I'll send you a welcome package with my books on faith and mental illness from a biblical perspective, and my devotional, plus a handwritten letter from me personally. So please, if you make a pledge of $5 or more to the ministry Patreon account, you'll get my books, handwritten plus a handwritten letter from me personally. So the link to the Patreon will be in the ministry website. So check that out. It's www.christcenteredmentalhealth.net. Um, but yeah, that's all I have to say. I hope you guys have a good day. God bless you, and stay strong in the Lord. All right, bye.